I don't grow my plants in traditional soil. I grow them in... Okay, if your plants keep dying from over or under watering, or you just don't know when to water them, or as in my case, you have way too many plants to check on them every day, then this might be the perfect solution for you. I have switched most of my plants into semi-hydro, and what that exactly is and how it works and how it made my life a lot easier, then keep watching. In this video, I'm going to show you what semi-hydro is, what different types of semi-hydro there are, what plants are suitable, and which type of semi-hydro you're going to use for which plant, how I set up mine at home, and the common mistakes I did when I started. Hi, my name is Lisa, and I'm a UK houseplant creator with over 150 houseplants in my one-bedroom flat in London. And I switched to semi-hydro a couple of years ago, and honestly, I'm not going back. So you might have heard this word before, PON and semi-hydro. So there are two things you should know. PON is the substrate, and semi-hydro is the way how you grow your plant. And I will get into that more in a bit. So what is PON? PON, which is also called product of nature, which I learned today when I did my research. I've been using it for more than 5 years, and I never knew that. Product of nature, because it is a mineral-based soilless potting mix. The basic PON mix contains pumice, cellulite, some lava rocks, and some clay pebbles. So when you have all of those minerals mixed in, either DIY at home or you buy it from Soil Ninja or Lechuza, provides the perfect air to water ratio so your roots won't rot or dry out. Some of the formulas, like Lechuza PON, is coming pre-fertilized, so you don't have to use any fertilizer for 6 months, roughly about 6 months. I trained most of my plants in PON to be semi-hydro, so they will have a water reservoir at the bottom. I only top up the water reservoir, and I don't have to water them sometimes for weeks until the reservoir is dry, and then only top it up again. So there is no under and over watering of the plant. Of course, consistency is always the key. That's the main issue I personally struggle with, especially in summer. I tend to not water them enough. They dry out, they rot, or in winter I overwater my plants in soil, and well, they rot and die. Yeah, which we don't want. I'm going to talk about two different ones and when to use for which plant. We have the coarse one today, and then we have a finer one. So this one is the coarse semi-hydro from Soil Ninja, and then we have the Lechuza PON. You can see the difference in fineness, and I will get into that, why it's very important to choose the right PON for your plant. The golden rule which I use on which PON or substrate to use with which plant is, for fine roots, I'm going to use finer PON. For thicker roots, such as anthurium, I'm going to use the coarse mix. There are two ways you can put up your plant in semi-hydro. The first one is you can get a self-watering pot, which would be one of those big ones where you can sample and then you fill it up with water. There's an indicator which shows you when to top up the water reservoir. Super easy, you cannot do a lot wrong with it. You pot up your plant in PON. You just top up the water reservoir every time when it's empty. But self-watering plant tester can be super pricey. Most of my plants are in a DIY. So I thought I'm going to show you how I repot my Anthurium magnificum. That was a tongue twister, you guys have no idea. Obviously outgrown is pot. Has some algae here on the moss, which we're going to remove. What we need for that is, I'm using a clear pot because it's an anthurium and it has thicker roots. We're going to use the coarse Soil Ninja semi-hydro mix. Let's go. So here again is the coarse semi-hydro mix. So if I use my own DIY setup, I normally, depending on the pot size, will keep this as the water reservoir. So there won't be any roots there. I even put a little bit more before putting the plant back in. Let's take that off. That looks so whimsical. It's like a little moss green forest fairy thing, or is it just me? So I'm going to take all the moss off. If anyone, by the way, knows what hybrid this is, please let me know in the comments. So that's how it looks like. It's been a bit rotted because I overwatered the moss over winter, because I tried to kill it with kindness. But here we are fixing our mistakes. I'm going to dump all the mix out. Oh, that's easy. You can see all the nice roots, and you can see quite a couple of rotted ones, so we're going to cut those off. So I have removed most of it. It's super easy and super quick to remove compared to soil. We'll be cutting away all the yucky roots. The rotted roots is when they reached the reservoir, they will be sitting in water. So that's only one thing you have to be careful of, is that you have to put them up more frequently as in soil. So I'm going to add some more, and then we're going to push it down a bit. And we give it a bit of a... That's all about it. And then next cube, it's the mystery mag. We're going to add some water, just roughly 3 centimeters into the water reservoir. This is non-fertilized mix, so that means I can add some fertilizer into the water reservoir. It's so easy to keep up with the watering, especially with 150 plants officially. So I gotta stick with that number. I can see when the plant needs watering. On most pots there are water indicators, or I see that the water reservoir is empty, and then I just refill it instead of sticking my hand or my finger into soil, which I am not a fan of it. Because it is soilless and only mineral based, it's less likely to get pests, especially the fungus gnats. Of course you still get some. If you're using it on moss poles like I do with my Rosé Bueno, it is a lot less fungus gnats than I would have if I would be using soil. Let's talk about the do's and don'ts from PON, so you guys can achieve exactly healthy, fluffy roots as well. Please give your plant time to adjust. It's quite a change from a soil environment for the roots to a non-soil environment. Don't just start on self-watering system. Give it time to adjust. You need to train your plants on self-watering. Don't just pot it up and chuck a liter of water in there and hope for the best. So start slow, add like a tiny little bit of water at the bottom and keep adding every time you water. I got a question as well, which was if I would choose PON or leca. So I would use a PON or semi-hydro mixture because it includes a leca. So leca, you have to be very careful with your pH level of the water so you don't burn your roots if you use it. It still works. It works for some plants. For the majority of plants, that the PON mix is better. As well, a common mistake is that you fill your water reservoir too much. Start with a little bit of water, see how your plant reacts. Some plants, they'll love to be drenched. I know my begonia, for example, she likes it wet. She is very happy. I always have to have quite a good amount of water in there, which I would not do that mistake with my anthuriums. Less is more. Depends on the plants as well, how much water you should put in. If it's a thirsty plant, I would like peace lily. Peace lily would be great for semi-hydro. I don't own a peace lily, sadly, but I can imagine that she would like it very much. Another plant which surprised me in semi-hydro was my ficus. They've grown so much. They are such thirsty plants. You can see if you check the water reservoir every other day and it's already empty, that you need to add more water to the reservoir. Yeah, if it's not drank enough, then you know exactly that you have to reduce the water level in your reservoir. Don't panic if your plant looks a little bit droopy and sad for the first few weeks if you transitioned it from soil to semi-hydro. Again, my begonia, I repotted her into a bigger pot during winter time because she was so root bound and she looked very miserable and droopy for at least 2 weeks. I did check if it's root rot and it wasn't. It's you can very clearly see it on the clear pots, hence we love to use them. But yeah, now she looks very happy. She bounced all back up, so maybe she was just being very temperamental about having her pot changed. One question I got was, does the pond get cold in winter? Yes, of course it does get cold. Everything gets colder in winter, so does your soil. For my collection in winter, because the plants are not actively growing and they should not be actively growing, they should rest so they have energy in spring to grow bigger. I'm not using the self-watering system in winter at all. I still water them normally, but I'm not keeping the water in the water reservoir because it just gets yucky and cold because it takes way too long for the plant to absorb and causes root rot. Another reason why I absolutely love semi-hydro is I love to use them with my big plants which are on moss poles. For one reason only, is I can water the moss pole as often as I want without having to worry about that the soil is staying too wet in the bottom pot. I highly recommend using the PON and moss pole combination. Yes, you will have some fungus gnats because they can lay their eggs in the sphagnum moss. You cannot really over water your plant in the semi-hydro if you water your moss pole, because we all know sometimes we just have to rehydrate the moss pole. I take the pot out of the decorative pot and just chuck the excess water away. A good thing as well is you always can reuse PON. If you had some root rot or you did ended up having some pests, I just boil it, I just kill everything. I have one pot especially just to boil my semi-hydro. I just boil it, I let it cool down, and I just reuse it as it would be new. So it's less wastage. So I mentioned as well before that I'm using the PON mix for my cacti without the self-watering system. Just watering it normally roughly once a month, obviously not during the winter time where the cactus is dormant. It works for me. I didn't have any issues with it so far and haven't killed anyone. With soil, however, I killed multiple. For me, the biggest thing for PON is it took a little bit out that stress of caring. Not that I don't like to care about my plants, but if I did had a 12-hour shift at work and I come home and I needed to have to water and check my plants in summer, I did not have the energy for that. So it actually made plant care easier for me personally. This might not be the right potting method or substrate for everyone. For me, it works well, and yeah, I stick for it for the past couple of years, and I'm very happy with that potting. If you have any more questions about semi-hydro, please don't be afraid and just put them in the comments and I'll try to answer all of them. Thank you for watching, and if you like this video, please like and subscribe. It really helps me a lot. I see you to the next one. Bye!